welcome to Let's Grow Therapy. Let's talk about the psychological side of POTS. So, everything I'm about to say is based on my own experience. I am not a doctor. Let's just get that out of the way. First off, I experienced so much medical gaslighting that POTS was a psychological disease that I began to reject the notion that my mental state could exacerbate the symptoms that I was having. I then swung to the opposite end and said, none of this is mental, all of this is physical, and I began to hate and resent my body. I began to talk in a manner that said, my body is against me, nothing works properly, it's not going my way, I absolutely hate this, they need to find something. They have to find something that is wrong in order for me to prove to every doctor that told me that it was all in my head that they were wrong. And now that I've been in this situation for many years at this point, what I can tell you is this. And I am not a doctor. Everything I'm about to say is just based on my own conceptualization, okay? Having a psychological aspect to chronic illness does not negate the significance of the symptoms of the chronic illness itself. It does not take away from the very real pain and suffering and hurt that we experience when our bodies do not work in the way that they previously did. But having an awareness for how mental state affects chronic illness allowed me to change my approach and changed the way that my body presented symptoms. It did not eliminate them, it changed them. And stick around because I'm going to explain this. And I already know that there's going to be a lot of people who are like, no, just stick around. So there's a huge connection between dysautonomia and the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve runs from the back of your head all the way down to your tailbone, and it controls the fight or flight reflex as well as the mental and emotional processing. Dysautonomia fundamentally means that there are aspects of your autonomic nervous system that act in a way that is different from how they were supposed to act. The vagus nerve is always in response to the autonomic nervous system. So, when my heart rate slows down when I stand and goes faster when I lay down, my vagus nerve is having an emotional and mental reaction. Because I swung to the far end of the spectrum that said there is nothing mental and emotional going on, this is entirely my body's fault, I did not pay attention to the role that the vagus nerve plays in creating a safe-ish environment for my body to exist in. I basically said, it is all of my body's fault, and now I am having super heightened reactions to things, and I don't know why, and it feels out of control. The vagus nerve lights up the body in a way that is extraordinary and intense. When a vagus nerve reacts or when it is dysregulated, we can be thrown into emotionally unpredictable scenarios that feel overwhelming and scary and frightening and stressful. It is the concept of being able to push yourself into an anxious response when we talk about fear prior to an experience. So it's not the placebo effect. It is that notion that if I promote a negative response prior to something happening, there is an aspect of the vagus nerve being in reaction to that response even before it happens, and finding it challenging to move into an alternative response because we basically prepped it with, oh, this is going to be really, 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 really bad. Okay, why would I think that it's going to be positive afterwards? Now, in relation to POTS, the biggest thing that I noticed was that I was always a worst case scenario person with POTS. It was, and this was my language, I can't stand for long periods of time. I can't do this. I can't do that. My heart doesn't work right. My legs aren't working right. I am physically broken. And so all day long, my mental and emotional sides are getting feedback that something is very, very, very wrong. And emotionally, we are not safe. Because if I say nothing works right, why would I feel comfortable going out into the world? There's a huge fear response there. There's a massive response that says, this is a dangerous place and I can't take care of myself out here. When I started doing nervous system regulation, one of the main things that I did was lowering that response by changing my language, not to toxic positivity, not necessarily to saying everything is so great, I am so healthy, etc., but to the simple step of saying, I can handle this. I can handle this. And I have tools in my toolkit that allow me to have a different response. And this is where the physical and the mental and the emotional work all have to be done in tandem. So physically, I was in like physical therapy. I was doing a whole bunch of healing practices that allowed me to build confidence with trusting my body again. So it allowed me to say, you understand what a POTS episode feels like, you understand what a hypoglycemic episode feels like, and you have now navigated them and you know what to do to reduce the occurrence of them or reduce the reaction as you're experiencing them. As I was building that confidence, I started changing the way that I spoke about my body in a way that said, you can handle this. Doesn't mean it's going to go perfectly, that's okay, but it was, you can handle this. Emotionally, what began to happen was I felt better and less hypervigilant about my physical symptoms, which then allowed my actual physical symptoms to come up. And what I mean by that is, because my vagus nerve was in such high reaction to my body, it was creating secondary sets of symptoms that made me feel like the entire house was on fire, when in reality, it was only one room. And it was a very significant room, and it was a very painful room, and it was a very intense experience that had a whole chock full of symptoms that required immediate attention. But I could not get to those things because I felt like the entire body was on fire and I didn't know where to start. And what began to happen for me was I cast a wide net with doctors. I saw every single one. I saw infectious disease specialists, cardiologists, internists, GI. I saw, who else did I see? Audiologists, neuro-ophthalmologists. I saw neuropsychologists. I've seen everybody. And because of that, I could not allow my body to calm down slightly in order for me to really find the exact symptoms that I was dealing with. When I changed the way that I spoke and when I was mindful of how my thoughts and my words exacerbated my symptoms or made me feel like I could handle them, my body began presenting symptoms differently, and what I call the fluff symptoms for me started disappearing. What I was then left with was the very real symptoms of my diagnoses. I was left with the jugular vein compression and the POTS and the Hashimoto's. And I was able to say, here are the 3 buckets that I am now dealing with, and I can list every single symptom that I experience because of these 3, as opposed to me saying, here's this laundry list of things that I'm experiencing, and none of them quite fit in a bucket, and what do I do? And that's a very infuriating space. When I went back and I did nervous system regulation, I changed the way that I spoke and I changed the way that I thought. and I worked with practitioners who allowed me to create safety in my body, I was then able to reveal the actual symptoms that I was dealing with that had been causing the rest of me to feel horrible. I found the root cause. And the full circle moment here is that when I was seeing doctors and they were gaslighting me, they didn't believe that there was a physical root cause. And when I was ignoring the psychological side and only going towards the physical side, I felt like there had to be a root cause. And then I began doubting myself because I couldn't find one. And the moment that I started talking to myself better, treating myself better, the physical root cause revealed itself. And I can tell you that that was one of the most relieving moments of my entire life, because it meant that I wasn't crazy. It also meant that the healing was possible. And those are two things that I could not experience earlier in my POTS journey, because my emotional and mental states were always in reaction to my physical body to a degree that triggered more and more and more symptoms across all aspects of me. And I was unable to find what had started the fire in the first place.